Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Welcome back to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with me, Karl Fitzpatrick. My final guest, innovation expert Fergal Brophy, believes that people's attitude to innovation has changed since the 2008 economic crash. But how should they now harness this predisposition to innovation and convert it into revenue? Fergal, you have quite the resume, but perhaps you can provide us with an overview of your own career to date.
So first of all, I was actually born in Wexford, grew up in Carlow, so I have a very close affinity to Southeast Radio and Wexford listeners, so I'm delighted to join there today. So I suppose a quick bit of background on myself is I did work with a couple of multinationals in brand management and then set up my own fintech business, co-founded in about 1999. It was called Open Financial Services. And we exited out of that in 2014 with a trade sale to Irish Life. And I was always very focused on innovation. We had a very innovative company with Open Financial Services. And so when I left there, I joined UCD Innovation Academy as an innovation facilitator.
Very interesting. Now, over the course of your career, what did you learn about innovation and, more importantly, how to innovate effectively?
So I guess the most important thing in terms of how to innovate effectively is to have the right mindset. It's a lot about mindset and bringing people on a journey with you. And the kind of mindset we're talking about is, we may have heard this expression before, it's like an entrepreneurial mindset. So what we tend to focus on a lot when we talk about innovation is things like who you are, what you know, and who you know. They're the key resources that we have as people. And if we look towards leveraging or what we can make out of those ingredients, that is the essence of the entrepreneurial mindset. Also, we do need some kind of signposting on how do we do this. So I would very much focus on design thinking, as it's the most widely used and proven approach to innovation.
And talk us through some of the projects that you've worked on over the last number of years around this design thinking process.
Yeah, Karl, that's a good question. I work with a wide variety of organisations. I work with corporates. I work with the public sector quite a lot, and I also work with the SME community, the community which I prefer to work with because I think it has such a huge impact on Ireland Inc. I'll give you an example of a project I've been working on recently, a very interesting project with a building contractor in Ashbourne in County Meath. They're called McKeown Group, a large organisation of about 120 staff, about 150 subcontractors, and they were very, very interested in innovation, bought into it fully. We ran some design sprints with them to get them up and going, and ultimately Tomas McKeown there, who's the CEO, invited all his staff to join an innovation community of practice, or kind of like an innovation committee. And so the committee was formed, and that committee now leads out on new innovation projects. It stands separate from the leadership team. They identify the projects they want to work on, the innovations, and they use that design thinking process to develop new products, new services, new ways of working, and new business models. It's been a huge success. It's a fantastic organisation. For example, during COVID, they obviously in the return to work, they were very challenged with such a large number of employees and subcontractors moving in and out of sites. So they had been planning for the return to work, and they looked to see, well, what is the most effective way to do this? They decided that the best way to do it was to use an app, and within one day, using Microsoft Apps, which is a free feature under a Microsoft tool, they developed an app for free in 24 hours, which is now being used throughout the organisation. In fact, they're using it for a number of other features on it now. They call it Good to Go, and they have made it available to all other building contractors in Ireland free of charge.
Wow.
These are the types of innovations we're talking about.
Now, you were also involved in a very exciting project with Shannon Chamber of Commerce during the pandemic around business model blitzing. What's that about and how did it work?
Yeah, so So it was obvious, I think, to everybody at the early stages of COVID that some high touch, that the high touch economy was going to be radically impacted. Some organizations, because the sectors they're in, the high touch sectors that they're in, were essentially going to be having a situation where they could see no sight of revenue for quite some time. So I approached Shannon Chamber to approach their members with a view to looking at the most vulnerable of these organizations, the organizations in the highest touch parts of the economy. So the way we ran it was a week-long program. The CEOs of the SMEs, I would send them an email in the mornings. Obviously, these people were very focused on trying to pick up the pieces in their business during the day. So there would be some content there along with some instructions on what to do during the day, whether it's get out and talk to their users, whether it's to try and define the problem to be solved, or whether it's to come up with a range of solutions or prototyping or testing. And then each evening I was on the phone to them, and I would coach them or mentor them through the stuff they had done that day, and we would talk about various opportunities that they might have to essentially to blitz their current business model and to look to see how could they repurpose their current business in a way that would generate some immediate income for them.
How have you innovated your own business in response to COVID-19?
Yeah, so look, all my work was in person, both at the Innovation Academy at UCD and at Fergal Brophy Innovation. Every time I had an intervention, it was meeting people. That was my modus operandi. That's the way I felt was the best way to do business. And then, of course, when COVID struck, we had to find a different way. I very quickly moved online, and of course, ably supported by my colleagues in UCD, we very, very quickly learned how to use Zoom to its maximum effect. I've made a series of videos, and just really focused on fostering virtual collaboration for this, as I say, for this new normal. In innovation, you live in a constant state of ambiguity, and to be comfortable as an innovator, you have to allow that ambiguity to sit comfortably. There is no defined outcomes. There's no defined timelines. You just have to believe and do the right things. And for me, it's worked out well because it's the only way I could actually do business is virtually, and there is a huge demand out there from organizations wanting to learn how to collaborate virtually, how to innovate in a virtual environment, how to foster creative, innovative mindsets, but ultimately how to develop new products, new services, new ways of working, and new business models on an ongoing basis.
And Fergal, many businesses have engaged in brainstorming sessions with limited success, I'm sure, over the years. What tips have you got for any business owner that's going to engage in such a session?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is know clearly what is the problem that you're trying to solve. So clearly defined problem, or point of view, we call it. And the template for that essentially is who needs a way to do what and why. And if there's clear understanding and clear alignment on the problem statement, then the next stage is it requires psychological safety. People have to feel that they can make suggestions, shout out ideas, and they're not going to be ridiculed, or they're not going to be critiqued, or they're not going to be judged. And psychological safety is a particularly difficult thing in the SME community. And so we need to foster that. So I use some tricks. So, for example, a very obvious trick is it's called hybrid brainstorming. So what we do in hybrid brainstorming is we get everybody around the table to think of solutions to the problem themselves. We then one by one, we ask people to present the solution they come up with. And then we have 2 minutes to build, improve, and improve on the ideas. So we only allow people to use positive linking sentences like yes and. They're not allowed to make judgments like using no's and buts. And this is a form of psychological safety. People feel safe in that environment. But really what you're doing is you're allowing your brainstormers essentially to build, combine and improve on the ideas of others. And that can often produce magic. But Karl, again, it's not a silver bullet. This is practice. You have to believe, you have to be very aware that there's going to be lots and lots of failure, and you've got to accept that. It's not failure, it's really an opportunity to learn. They're the kind of jewels in the crown of brainstorming.
Am I correct in saying that businesses need to be patient when it comes to innovation?
Very patient, very patient. But if they think properly about it and look for easy wins instead of the kind of transformational product or the transformational service, and instead looking at trying to improve a process or trying to tweak an existing product. And if they can think about that kind of incremental innovation, and with that incremental innovation, if they can have many small wins, they'll see big wins, and that will create or build on the creative confidence of the staff. I believe that will help them to habitually develop these new products and services, ways of working and business models.
And Fergal, as a student of innovation, what companies stand out to you as great innovators, not just at a startup phase, because as you say, many companies are good at that point, but a company that has gone on and kept innovation to the fore of their organisation?
Look, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give a boring answer here, really, which is Amazon. It's the first that jumps to mind. Jeff Bezos. I mean, nobody believes more in innovation. He talks to his shareholders at every opportunity about experimentation. So he has a great sentence, which is that if you double the number of experiments you conduct every year, you double your level of innovation. So if you think of what he's saying there, he's essentially saying experiments equals innovation. And I love that idea because, of course, when we come up with a solution, the very first thing we need to do is prototype it and test it and then learn from the customer. And Jeff Bezos and his leadership team, that's what they're champions at doing. If you only think about them, an online retailer that almost accidentally got into web servicing, and today twice the revenue comes from AWS than it does from Amazon.com. They produce hundreds and hundreds of new products and services every year. They're absolutely masters at innovation.
And finally, Fergal, these are challenging times for many businesses. So what's your parting advice for them this morning?
So I think a theme I've been working a lot on since COVID has been the theme of repurposing. I believe that repurposing is going to become a hugely important tool for the SME. So if you think about the amount of change that's required to navigate this new normal, alongside all the other change that's happening with Brexit, with ever-changing customers' expectations, with all the new technologies that are on the horizon, all this change is everywhere. And we can't continue to invest in new resources. SMEs simply don't have that financial muscle. But I think what we need to do is to focus on what we have and how can we repurpose what we have in order to create value. So, for example, we see companies, a lovely company in Derry, Block Blinds, very early in COVID, repurposed their entire manufacturing operation in order to make PPE equipment. They approached Derry City Council and they got the Meadowbank Sports Arena completely repurposed. And they have 320 people hired who make PPE equipment 24/7 now, completely repurposing what they did. I love Combi Lift up in Monaghan. Many of you probably know Combi Lift, one of Ireland's most innovative SMEs for sure, and one of the leading forklift manufacturers in the world. Now, if you think of what their core business is, they are essentially mech tech. So they're mechanical and technical and electrical engineers. And so they looked at, during COVID as well, how could they repurpose their brains of their organization and their manufacturing processes. And ultimately, the problem they focused on was ventilators. So you may remember at an early stage in COVID, we were hugely concerned in Ireland here about our ventilator population. We have a total of 1,100 ventilators in Ireland. And while many people were focusing on how we could procure more ventilators, they're very expensive and they were in very short supply. Combi Lift decided to focus on how we could make better use of the 1,100 we had. And they developed, over a period of about 5 weeks, a splitter for ventilators. So this perfectly splits the ventilator to service 2 people instead of 1. So essentially overnight, his little piece of technology is after doubling the ventilator population in Ireland from 1,100 to 2,200. But what did he do there? He just simply repurposed. So I think my advice for the SME is not to be thinking about how you acquire new resources in order to add value to your organization. I think we need to really focus on what we have and how we can possibly repurpose to reimagine what we have in order to create value.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was innovation expert Fergal Brophy, and I would like to thank Fergal for sharing some of his tools with us this morning.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast.